can sit in the middle. Someone else can sit. You two can. We can sit wherever. Jim, which seat do you want?
I could care wherever you want me.
You want to go in the middle?
She said Jim there.
Jim there, me there, me down on the end. You're sliding over too. Sorry. We all have water?
Shall we start? Can we get started? Hello? Is it? Sorry. Oh. Can you hear me?
Can you hear?
I just need to speak louder. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Gloria Steele. I think Gary introduced me earlier. And I'd like to thank all of you for being here with us today. Really excited about this panel. Takes a different perspective. And I think it's looking at a very important issue at this time of foreign assistance. We have been asked to embrace change, and we should always do that. And we are seeing a lot of changes going on right now. I just want to give a background to remind you that foreign assistance was authorized by the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961. It created USAID and the Peace Corps. And in that act, we were told that foreign assistance is a distinct and separate objective of foreign policy. But even in that case, it is supportive but not subordinate to the United States commercial and security interests. That's one important thing, that despite all the changes and amendments to the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961, has not been changed, has not been dropped. The second principle behind foreign assistance that has not changed, has not been dropped, is the principle that we help other countries become socially and economically viable because it is our moral responsibility as America to do so, to help countries, to help other countries. And so foreign assistance is embedded not just as strategy, but in the values of America. So over the last few decades, over more than 6 decades, foreign assistance has been intended to provide support for countries to achieve global stability and global prosperity. And through this, the intention is through soft power, be able to improve the economic and meet the economic and social interests of the United States. But the landscape is quickly changing on that. There are many policymakers who argue that foreign aid, foreign assistance, should be directed primarily to countries that have the resources that we need in the United States to meet our economic, commercial, and security needs. And this is an important point that we need to keep in mind. And we need to understand, and today, that's what we're going to talk about, is what does this mean? How does it affect what we do? And so with that, I just wanted to give that as a background. And with that, I'd like to introduce our esteemed panel members. To my left is Jim Kunder, who who's former deputy administrator and longtime leader in modernizing U.S. development policy. Jim brings deep insight into how U.S. development policy has evolved over various administrations and global contexts. Next to Jim is Eric Bjornlund. He is the co-founder and president of Democracy International, with decades of experience in governance, democratic development around the world, globally. And then to the left, extreme left, is Nate Soul. Excuse me. Nate Soul, who is the executive director of the Campaign for America First International Assistance, or CAFIA. CAFIA is a very interesting organization. Nate will bring perspective rooted in a more explicit America First orientation. And this is what we are going to talk about today. One that argues that reciprocal foreign assistance, while affirming will continue to affirm America's enduring moral responsibility to support countries in overseas. So please join me in welcoming our panelists of today. And with that, let me start with Jim. Jim, you've been in international development for a long time. And how does today's emphasis on reciprocity and a reciprocal economic statecraft, to be specific, compare with earlier efforts to reform or modernize U.S. foreign assistance? And in your view, is this current shift an evolution of what started in the past, or a major change?
Can you hear me okay if I speak at this level?
Yeah.
Okay. Obviously, that's a great question, Gloria. And my view, look, I was a Republican political appointee in 3 Republican administrations at USAID. And to some extent, I reject the premise. I think the current crew that has designed the current system thinks they've discovered national interest as an objective of U.S. foreign assistance. I'll tell you, you can consider me cursed or blessed, but I've had the opportunity to attend more than 200 National Security Council meetings. And I guarantee you, U.S. national security interest has been around as long as the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961 that Gloria referred to. So I reject the basic premise, and I think the development community is yielding too much if you accept that premise unquestioningly. Of course, foreign assistance was driven by the traditional generosity of the American people, but it was also always driven by U.S. national security interests. What I think the real change is in the new design, and first of all, it's hard to know what the new design is, right? Because there's not much transparency at the State Department. I'd love to know what's in the new compact healthcare compact with Kenya, except they can't get a copy of it, right? I'm going to make some assumptions, but what seems to be different is a short-term transactional nature of this. And to me, that's an important distinction, because, the statistic I like most in terms of what our community, all of you, have accomplished over the years is that the year USAID was formed, the year the Foreign Assistance Act was written, 1961, the global literacy rate was 41%. 2 people out of 5 on the face of the earth could read. Now, the global literacy rate is approximately 87%. That is of enormous strategic advantage to the United States of America. It means that those trying to stir up instability around the world, trying to attack us, now have to confront people who know how to read. That's a huge advantage. So that was an enormous contribution to U.S. national strategic interests. And it also helped people improve their lives. but it helped our country's national security interests. It helped make America safer, stronger, more prosperous. So my point is that I think the real issue is it better if this is done on a short-term basis? If there's immediate feedback, immediate reciprocal interest to the United States. But I don't accept the basic premise, Gloria, that somehow the current crew has discovered national security and making America safer, stronger, and more prosperous as something new. And before that, we weren't doing it, because I guarantee you, we certainly were doing it.
And I think it was largely through soft power. And as I was saying, it was largely through soft power, helping other countries, and in the process, meeting our own needs here in the United States. And I think that's one of the most important premise of the Foreign Assistance Act of 1961, which is being challenged. What is being challenged, I think, is what we are being told is that we need to direct assistance primarily to countries that have the resources that we need in order to meet our own needs. And so that's where the change is. And so with that, so if reciprocity is the central driver of assistance, I wanted to ask Eric, what does this mean? We just listened to MCC, a very great exchange on MCC. MCC, as all of you know, who know MCC, was based on good governance. I think our earlier speaker said that good governance is the primary lens by which they make a decision on whether a country receives assistance or not. And when good governance does not exist, and they have all these metrics to measure that. And when a country fails to reach the bar, they don't get assistance. They probably will get the MCA, the pre-compact to bring them up there. But that's not what the reciprocity approach means now. If I could quote Undersecretary Landau, says it is important that we reach out, we assist countries that can reciprocate, that have the resources that we need in order to meet our own economic and commercial interests. So with that, I really want to go to Eric. What does this mean, Eric? When the central driver is reciprocity, a country's ability to give us back what we need in order to meet our needs. Can you tell us what that means for development? You have watched this over the years. This has been what you've done throughout your career, or most of it. What does it mean when a country, when there's weak governance or principle, there's no rule of law, etc., in terms of meeting the United States needs, our own needs?
Well, I want to focus on, thank you, Gloria, it's a pleasure to be here. I want to focus really on democracy and good governance issues and rule of law that you mentioned.
Yeah.
I think promoting democracy and good governance is in the interest of America and Americans. What seems clear to me, and I think should be obvious to everyone in this room, is that democracies are, evidence shows that democracies are better trading partners because they have less instability, they respect the rule of law, they don't tend to go to war against each other, they are less likely to drive refugee flows, they tend to respond to the basic needs of people in their countries, so there's more stability in countries and regions because of that. So it's in the interest of the U.S. for there to be democracies. Countries that are democratic are more likely to try to address their own problems. So I agree with Jim. I think that while there may be a tension at times between DG goals and, say, commercial interests, maybe in the short term, it's a false trade-off. Prioritizing commercial and security, strategic interests over governance doesn't redound to the benefit of the U.S. It doesn't serve U.S. interests. It's just deferring the costs. But I would say that local ownership is critical. Democracy and governance programs, and I think development programs more broadly, only work if and to the extent that they're embraced by the countries that they are intended to help. If leaders believe that the reforms that are being advocated to them, the efforts that are being promoted are intended to serve U.S. interests, whether those are strategic, commercial, or anything else, they're much less likely to have an incentive to internalize them or to sustain them. The programs are less likely to be successful in that sense. So I think that we don't need to choose between U.S. interests and governance objectives. They're aligned over any serious time horizon. Accountable institutions, rule of law, vibrant civil society are what make countries stable and make them good partners, and sacrificing them for short-term wins is a bad trade. I think the idea that democracy support overseas is somehow inconsistent with U.S. foreign policy is simply incorrect.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, please.
Can I make just one quick comment? Eric knows 1,000 times more than I do about democracy and governance programs, but my consulting company helps private sector American companies who want to invest overseas. And what I've found, and it's been an epiphany to me, is that most of these are American companies. They want to make a profit. They're not doing this out of the goodness of their hearts. But when I talk to them, they understand better than the current administration understands the fact that in order to have an investable climate, you need changes in democracy and governance. You need rule of law. You need courts that operate, that will uphold contracts. And so even certainly at the high level that Eric was just describing, I care deeply about democracy and governance, especially since we're on the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence, right? America cares something about democracy and governance. But even at the transactional level, I've been astonished to find, Gloria, that most American businessmen that I've talked to, they understand very well that they better have democracy and governance working well in the countries in which they're going to invest if they're going to put up their hard-earned dollars.
True, and I think that's what MCC was built on, and that's what USAID has done in order to be able to get MCC to operate in a country that has good governance. Nate, tell me, how does CAFIA interpret the concept of reciprocity? It has America First in its name. And how does that align with the current administration's declaration about reciprocity and America First?
Sure. So can everybody hear me? Yeah? Good. I think one of the important things that CAFIA stands for on this front is that there are a lot of things that we're already getting back in exchange for what we're sending overseas, right? We're getting back a healthier world. We're getting back an America where if we're doing the right things, especially on the global health front, we're preventing diseases from, coming over here and kind of causing problems. And I think a big part of what I've been doing in dealing with the administration as I've been working my way through the White House, hopefully meeting with Susie in August, meeting with James Blair this month, is communicating to them that the voters, out there understand the tangible benefits that exist from the United States' efforts to, provide aid overseas, and that not all of these deals need to be based in some kind of trade-off, right? We don't need to get back something in exchange, some critical minerals deal, as important as that is and is something that the administration cares about. It is also important for the admin to keep in mind that voters understand that there is already a tangible benefit to international assistance spending especially, right? And so I think, on CAFIA's front, while we certainly want to see in the long term, more aid to trade, it has to be done with an understanding that it's not going to happen overnight, right? If we did that when we started PEPFAR with the idea that, we would be able to send, fix a lot of problems that existed, especially in Southeast Asia and Sub-Saharan Africa, overnight without any long-term tangible benefits returning, I think that would have been catastrophic if we hadn't done that. So to me, it's about helping the administration sort of reframe their viewpoint on it, understand where voters are at, and that's a lot of the work that CAFI has been doing. And again, in all of the districts that we've polled in, done advertising in, done focus groups in, worked with evangelical groups in, there is a general understanding and a supermajority in every single one of those seats, doesn't tie aid to reciprocity. It just believes that aid should happen.
I'd like to stay with Nate for a minute here. Well, how do you align that with the current declaration that we only work with countries that have the resources we need? How do your constituents in the coalition, the farmers, view that perspective?
Sure. Well, I mean, a lot of farmers, especially soybean farmers, are really hurting right now. So their attitude is we need to make sure that we're actually spending in some of these areas in order to make sure that the market still exists for their products. That's another discussion for another day. But ultimately, the thing that we've heard time and again, whether it's been in Iowa, Arizona, Colorado, Pennsylvania, Maine, Ohio, Wisconsin most recently, is that there is an overarching desire that there is some net tangible return to the United States, that exists everywhere, but it's not tied directly to a direct economic benefit. As important as that is for the United States in the long run, and we certainly need to keep that in mind when we're working on this front. Folks in these districts and across the country understand that there are already tangible benefits, right? And so, to me, I think the administration, as they've continued to see some of the polling numbers, as they've continued to see some of the things out of the focus groups that we've been conducting, they've come to, I think, a better understanding in some respects on that front. But ultimately, you have to convince a whole lot more than just one or two people in the admin, right? And you have to work your way up to folks in the administration who are able to make decisions kind of unilaterally, right? And so I think as we continue to work our way through the administration and share the information that we're getting out of the field, we feel pretty strongly at CAFIA that will result in hopefully some shifts down the line in terms of this total singular focus on reciprocity.
I think that's really quite important. I think, and this is my opinion, that one of the reasons that U.S. aid was quickly and easily dismantled was the lack of constituency for foreign assistance. And is that what you're trying to do from the grassroots level?
Yeah, so
it's trying to get constituents to understand what it is assistance is about, how it affects them, as well as the globe, the rest of the countries, etc. Is that what CAFIA is about?
Yeah, so I mean, CAFIA's primary focus, A, is increasing the top lines in all of kind of the international assistance buckets. But B, it's certainly trying to make sure there is a political constituency moving forward that can, engage when there are threats made to certain buckets of funding, right? And I think one of the things that we saw in 2025 as a former chief of staff on the Hill, a swing district chief, there were a lot of swing district chiefs who were all kind of shocked with the pace at which USAID was dismantled in February of 2025, right? And there was kind of uniform horror, frankly, amongst a number of us as we saw a lot of programs rolled back, right? But the fact of the matter was there was not a political constituency that was organized in advance in order to be able to counteract those efforts and those cuts, right? And so part of what CAFIA is trying to do is, A, make sure the administration is aware that there is a strong political constituency for this that exists within pretty much every key swing district and a number of the key swing states that are going to decide the control of Congress this November. But also making sure that there are people in these districts and there are folks in these different communities and there are groups that are organized in order to be able to prevent that from happening moving forward. And I think, in our polling, every time we go into a district, we see positive movement on the issues, whether it's on global health, whether it's on food assistance, even democracy building, for example, is another one where we've seen positive movement. malaria was our most recent testing that we did in Wisconsin. We saw movement amongst conservative voters by 36 points in terms of them wanting to support more funding to tackle malaria before and after we did our spend in Wisconsin's 1st congressional district, which President Trump carried by about 10 points, so it's a pretty Trumpy district. You know, at the end of the day, I think getting back to it, building a political constituency is critical for this community, and it's critical for every community, but it's very important for this community right now. And CAFIA is going to continue to work on that and focus on that in an effort to try and make sure that voters in these districts, especially conservatives and Republicans, understand the tangible net benefits that exist with international assistance spending.
Thank you. Jim, I'd like to get back to you. I know that you've been working with a number of organizations and people to take a look at what the future should look like in terms of foreign assistance. What do you, in terms of what's happening now, policymakers are continuing to base decision-making on foreign assistance based on reciprocity. What can they do for us? And what would you advise in the concept that you're putting together? I mean, the ball is rolling. We can't stop that right now. I don't know how many member countries there are in Pax Silica, and we know that although humanitarian assistance, as we heard earlier today, is going to go where humanitarian assistance is needed, that's only 10% of the total. There's still the rest that will be allocated based on how useful they are in terms of meeting our needs. What would you advise in the paper or the strategy paper that you're putting together to make sure that even as reciprocity is being the central driver, that long-term development continues to happen as you intervened earlier, as your intervention earlier pointed out? What should we be doing? What should they be doing?
Gloria's being very nice to me. She and I have been in numerous staff meetings together, and I used to drive people crazy at USAID because after we'd have a really deep, informative conversation, I always end up with, "That's great. What am I supposed to do Monday morning?" Right?
That's
what
exactly.
am I next Monday morning? What's the first thing I should do to make some progress? So I appreciate that question. Look, first of all, this is my opinion. My wife will be glad to tell you I have an opinion on everything. So this is my view of how to proceed. First of all, don't draw the arguments in the wrong place. So don't draw the argument around national security. The American public cares about national security, and the American public wants foreign aid to be supporting U.S. national security. So at that level, at that high order level, don't try to fight that argument. Second, don't try to fight the private sector and economic growth. As all of you, I think, already know, even if I add up the totality of all official development assistance around the world, multilateral and bilateral, it is far exceeded by remittances and even further exceeded by foreign direct investment. We have a global economy. American firms should invest in Africa, and American firms' prosperity in Africa should benefit Africans as well. So don't draw the line on fighting economic growth. As far as that goes, I like the administration's approach to try to bring foreign aid and foreign direct investment and American business prosperity together. I think it's a winning argument, actually, and it helps answer the part of the question that Nate is raising about how do you appeal to the American public. But the methodology was all lousy here in the last year. If you care about long-term national security interests of the United States, and if you care about promoting American business abroad, why would you design a U.S. foreign aid program around healthcare, agriculture, and emergency response? I mean, there's nothing about governance. I mean, if you care about healthcare even, it's all curative stuff. It's all about delivery of medicines. Again, I don't have to tell any of you this, but you know, children die in Africa and across the developing world because of lack of clean water, not because of lack of medicines. I mean, medicines, of course, count. but the design is all wrong for a pro-business national security approach to foreign assistance. So to answer your question directly, I would say take the president at his word last January 20th. His national security document called for his executive order called for a reevaluation of U.S. foreign aid to take into account the world we live in, where foreign direct investment is vastly important. The problem is we never had the review. So my advice, tactical advice, is get to Capitol Hill. And there are 3 asks on Capitol Hill. Number 1, let's have the review, the strategic review that the president called for last January, but we never did. The single most shocking statistic to me is we did all this destruction in the last year, destruction of federal agencies, destruction of federal employees' careers, destruction of good programs that were helping people around the world. The Senate Foreign Relations Committee has not held 1 hour of hearings on the future of foreign assistance in a year and a half. So it's time for serious congressional engagement. It's time for serious hearings on the future of foreign assistance. The second ask is to demand transparency. It's pretty hard to fight these things if you can't read anything. I mean, the national security strategy, I've read it in detail. It's very general and vague. The global health strategy, which the keynote speaker is going to wrap up on today, is highly focused, not just on transactions, Gloria, but on specific curative reactions. So we need the Congress to get seriously engaged, demand transparency of what the administration's doing, demand hearings, comprehensive hearings on what we really should be doing with our foreign assistance program. And the third one is the Appropriations Committee. As again, I think all of you know, what's going to happen this year when the administration says there are 3 things we do in foreign aid: food, health, emergency response. And the fiscal year 26 appropriations bill has in it gender programs, agriculture programs, democracy and governance programs, water and sanitation programs. There's nobody at the State Department to run any of those programs. So we need to go to the Hill. We need to ask some very specific operational questions about how this is going to work. That's the missing piece. That's what didn't happen in 2025, and it's what we need, in my mind, to aim the program back in the right direction.
Thank you, Jim. Let me ask Eric the same question about how is this going to work. When, as you, Jim, has said that global stability depends on foreign assistance, when foreign assistance does not go to countries where instability already exists because they have nothing to offer except the problem of instability, what do we do? I mean, what would your advice be to leave out many, many countries that deal with conflict, instability, all the crises that we can think of, but have nothing to offer to the United States that we actually need or that will meet our commercial and security needs?
Yes, it won't surprise you to know that I agree with the premise of your question. A strict reciprocity model is going to naturally leave out countries that need it most, that need support. Fragile and low-income countries are almost by definition not able to offer short-term benefits to the United States in any kind of transactional relationship, and they're going to get left behind. So not only is it the right thing to do to worry about those countries, it's also in the interests of the U.S. Instability and state failure, humanitarian crises are clearly problems for the U.S. And we need to have some sense that the reciprocal value to the U.S. doesn't have to be immediate, that there's some benefit long term to worrying about those countries. Reciprocity might be the right metric for accountability for trade relationships or economic deals, but it's just not the right metric for foreign aid. The returns for foreign aid are longer term and more diffuse, but they're real. They're not transactional and immediate, but they're real. Fewer refugees, better economic circumstances in the world, more stable trading partners, et cetera. And also, and I think this is a paradox that I've tried to explain to people, I think the moment that you make the transactional logic explicit, you undermine your programs. It's kind of a paradox, but it's in the American interest to do foreign aid programs, but it doesn't help to talk about them. I think I alluded to this a few minutes ago. We want to catalyze change in the world. We want to encourage it. So we need other countries to own it, to believe in it, to sustain it. And they're not going to do that if they just think that they're in a transactional relationship where we're just looking out for our own interests. So I think that a model that just says we're here because it benefits us is counterproductive, and it is not going to lead to sustainable change that's going to benefit the U.S.
Thank you. Nate? Public debate presents a choice between helping vulnerable populations, question that I had asked Eric earlier, and advancing U.S. interests. My understanding is that CAFIA views this as a false choice, that in fact CAFIA believes that you can meet our interests as well as meet the needs of vulnerable populations. Tell us how you articulate that as you advocate for foreign aid under the umbrella of CAFIA, because that is definitely runs contrary to the issue of reciprocal economic statecraft or reciprocity or America First, which is in the name of your organization.
Is this on? Yeah, great. I mean, I think, again, I go back to, not to kind of harp back on some of the stuff I mentioned prior, but, it's about kind of also making sure that those who are the decision makers in the administration are, understanding and educated on the direct, tangible benefits that a lot of this foreign assistance spending has in the United States, as well as, again, the local populations in a lot of these districts, right? In Iowa, we source a lot of agricultural, and, I know we've been, harping on not, being fans of the current construct of certain, foreign assistance. But in Iowa and a lot of other states across the country, there are a lot of farmers who provide resources and their crops for being able to send overseas or turning into a product that the United States then makes here and then sends overseas, right? And I think part of the false choice that we believe exists is that all of these dollars don't present some kind of tangible benefit to Americans, when in fact, when you go through pretty much all of the, not all of it, but almost all of the programming that is done out of a lot of these buckets, there are, incredible tangible benefits to the United States, right? If we're able to reduce childhood malnutrition, if we're able to tackle malaria, tackle HIV and AIDS, tackle Ebola, and all sorts of other, things on the healthcare front, it really helps Americans a lot here at home if we're not having to spend $1,000 on the back end versus $1 on the front end, right? And so in dealing with the administration, getting them to kind of understand that cost-benefit analysis of how much more, and I don't need to lecture the folks in this room, they understand it, how much more efficient it is to spend $1 on the front end than to spend $1,000 on the back end dealing with some kind of disease or some other issue is actually quite a important and salient argument I've found in the discussions I've had with folks in the administration, when you're able to frame it in a way where they see not only the tangible benefits within the United States for certain contracts and for certain foreign aid spending, but also the tangible benefits and what is avoided down the line, right? And that's something where, as all of us are engaging with the administration and especially with the Hill, we need to continue to harp on that and make sure that those folks understand it and, understand that there is a large group and a large political constituency that exists for this, not only within the districts, but also, within the D.C. area. A lot of us are based out of here. If we're able to continue to raise our voices and do what we're doing, I think it'll result in some hopefully tangible benefits in this appropriations process. And certainly, as Susan Collins is putting together these appropriations bills, the more we're able to engage with her and encourage her to break from the administration on certain areas, I think it will be beneficial for this community writ large.
Thank you. Catherine says we have 10 minutes. I was going to ask the question to Jim, but I want to ask all of you the same question now. Imagine that we're now in 2035. Looking back at the 2035. What would convince you that the current strategy that is evolving today has been successful or not? And what would it mean if success was there? What does it mean for the countries where we work, where the United States is supposed to be working? So what does success look like? What would failure look like? And how does this affect the countries where we work? So let me ask Jim first, and then Eric, and then Nate.
Oh, wait, that's it. We got 10 minutes. We could have a 3-day workshop on that question. Let me just say, I think you're raising a very important question, and that is the whole question of metrics. I mean, everything I've read that comes out from the administration on the new program emphasizes, we're not going to do it that old-fashioned way. We're going to do it in a more business-like, measured fashion, as though the people writing these papers are going to lecture, the Society for International Development on monitoring and evaluation. I mean, it's a preposterous assumption to start with. But in my view, metrics are important. And the critical metric, I distrust anybody who can't fill in the blanks in the following sentence. By year blank, following this program will make the world better by blank. You should be able to say, if we do these things, some outcome metric is going to occur globally. If we do this new healthcare program, there are not going to be any more outbreaks of disease in Africa that could be transmitted to the United States, or something like that. But what I don't see in any of this is any long-term metrics. I don't see any outcome measurements. So to me, where I would want to be in 2035, to answer your question directly, is I would have wanted somebody in 2025, 26, to have written the outcome metric for 2035, so I know where the hell we're headed with this whole enterprise. And that's what probably bothers me more than anything else about this short-term transactional thing. It's not that it's national security oriented, that's fine. It's not that it's business oriented, that's fine. I'd like to know where the heck it's all going, because otherwise it looks like a kind of a Tammany Hall walking around money form of foreign assistance, where we're passing money around. And what I fear in 2035 is, just like today, this administration is saying, oh, geez, USAID did all that stuff. What did they accomplish in the world? An administration in 2035 is going to say, gee, they had all those compacts with all those African countries. Whatever happened to those billions of dollars? So that's my answer. I want to see today the metric, the outcome global metric for the foreign assistance program in 2035.
Okay, thank you. I was hoping you'd give the metric. Maybe Eric will.
I don't know the metric. I know that part of the answer of success is for Nate and his friends to be able to convince Republicans and conservatives that this is in the interests of the United States to do foreign aid. It's not just charity. And I think we're only going to be in a good place in the world in 2035 if we either abandon the idea of America first, or we at least redefine it to understand why these long-term efforts matter for the whole world, and therefore they matter for us. This is critical for us as a country to rebuild the trust that's been destroyed over the last year and a half, and rebuild the efforts to try to make a difference. The money that we are ever going to spend as a country in direct foreign assistance is never going to really move the needle. It's just not enough money compared to all the other things you mentioned, all the other considerations, all the money moving in the world. It's not just about projects. It's about signaling. It's about showing what we believe in, what we care about. It's about catalyzing change, and we're going to need to get back to that kind of an understanding of why we're doing this in order for it to be helping our country and serving the interests of our country.
Thank you. Nate?
I think there's two fronts to this. There's international and domestic, right? Domestically, I think it's critical that there is a growth in the constituency that believes in common sense, international assistance that helps promote the United States' values overseas and helps prevent disease transmission, helps feed people, et cetera, right? So, domestically, that's going to be critical, and that's going to be critical in November of this year, November 2028, November 2030. I could keep going. You guys get the point, right? Internationally, I think it's as it's always been. Are we making the world a freer, safer, healthier place, right? And that's, I'm not going to put a metric on it because Jim didn't, and I don't want to try to put a metric on something Jim didn't put a metric on. But to me, that's always, the role of the United States is not to, shy away from our responsibility as the leader of the free world, because when we do, Russia, China, and other adversaries step in and take that role away from us, right? And that drags the rest of the world more towards autocracy, which I think is, everyone in this room agrees, a very bad thing. So ultimately, I'll leave it there. I think it's incumbent on us domestically to make sure there is a constituency that is loud and cares about this issue and is in the ears of lawmakers and in the ears of future administrations and this one to fight for the funding that needs to be fought for in order to make sure our goals are met. And then internationally, if we're in a place where there's not been a resurgence in polio, not been a resurgence in HIV/AIDS, in some ways, a status quo would almost be a good thing. I think, given some of the changes that we've seen over the last year and a half. But I will be optimistic and hope for the best that we are healthier, happier, safer, more democratic, and in a better place.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the many very useful insights that you provided us. One thing that I picked from all that you shared with us, one important thing, although there were very many important things, is that if we're going to meet our national interests, it is important to meet the needs of other countries. I think that in the absence, if we interpret reciprocity or America first very narrowly to just meet our needs, we will actually not meet our needs in the long run. And I think that's what the three of you were saying. So thank you very, very much for sharing your insights with us, and I hope the audience keeps.
Thank you, Gloria, Jim, Eric, and Nate. Really, really interesting to hear your various points of view, and a great way to almost end the day. We are not done yet. You can catch the last few minutes of the exhibit hall. It's closing at 4:30, and there should be more coffee out there. But I hope you'll just stretch your legs, glimpse the hall, get some coffee or whatever you need, and come right back, because in about 15 minutes or so, we will have our final session, the fireside chat with Jeff Graham, Senior Bureau Official from the State Department, talking with Wade Warren about global health, and then we'll have our reception. So hope to see you all back here in just a few minutes. Thank you.